Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday morning. Dave is still on vacation, so this will be us for the entire week. We do have Coach Landry on today, coming up in about 30 minutes. Caleb, how are you?
Pretty good. I apologize, guys. My chair sunk by accident right there.
No worries.
It's pretty good. How are you this morning, Amanda?
I'm still nervous on I don't know, the whole Mike Leach thing has thrown me for a loop. And I'm still sitting nerves right now because we still don't know much about the situation, and that's fine because family and all of that. I completely understand, but it's just like a sinking feeling I have, and I don't like it.
I agree. And just so people know, it was reported last night from from Mississippi State University, that he's in critical condition. That's as far as we've got right now. That could mean a lot of things. There were some massive scares yesterday. Bill Snyder, former Kansas State coach, tweeted implying he had died. We just don't know, guys. Nobody knows what's going on yet. There are rumors. Before anybody jumps to conclusions, it's not smart to publicly say anything yet. You can piece things together on what might have happened, but for now, let's just say we're all thinking about Mike Leach. He's in our prayers, I think, and nobody wants this.
No, God, no, we don't. And for his family's sake, there's a lot of people speculating and stuff, and I'm sure his family's not focused on Twitter right now. I'm sure his family's not focused on anything, but for his family's sake, it's just better to, to let things happen and play out, and then we'll go from there. But still praying for Mike Leach, praying for his family, just hoping he pulls through. Honestly, just hoping he pulls through. So, with that, Caleb, let's talk about Tennessee now. Let's talk about the bowl game coming up, Orange Bowl against Clemson. That's a big one. It's a big one for Tennessee. And who are the big names that you are seeing that are possibly sitting this one out?
Well, for Tennessee, we've got one confirmation last night. It was Cedric Tillman, who's decided he's going to focus on the draft. I know you and I disagreed yesterday on opting out. I think you're on my side with Tillman, though, because he's had an ankle injury this year. And, I don't think he'd be that effective anyway in the Orange Bowl.
No, I don't think he's going to be effective at all. I don't think he's been effective this year. I mean, I know he's had the ankle injuries, and I know he's had, that those surgeries on both of his ankles to make them stronger, but I don't see him. He hasn't been effective this year at all. I think Cedric Tillman, and due to injury, not saying it's him specifically or, he's done anything wrong, but I think Cedric Tillman this season has been a big disappointment for Tennessee. I mean, for that offense. Not that they really, and honestly, they didn't need him. So, it wasn't that big of a loss, but as far as playing, it seemed like he wasn't necessarily in it this season.
Well, I think he was, and then the Georgia loss happened, and then it rained the next week when they played Missouri. So Heupel and company decided to kind of keep him out because you have the ankle, and I think part of it is Heupel and the team, and he was playing to not re-injure himself, which I totally understand. And I think Heupel and the staff were coaching to not re-injure him, hoping he'd be full go for the college football playoffs should they get in. I think once they lost to South Carolina, I think he did play. I actually thought he did play as hard as he could against South Carolina. I remember watching that game. He tried to keep them in that game. I think once that loss happened, though, there was just no reason for him to – there was really no reason for him to come back, and he didn't. He didn't play against Vanderbilt, and there was no reason for him to play in the bowl game. He was never quite right this year. We know how good he is when he's fully healthy. I mean, even despite playing minimal this year, he's still a big reason that they are 10-2 and not 9-3. They don't beat Pitt on the road without Cedric Tillman in that game. And I think it's one of those where hindsight's 2020. He came back for a year he thought he could boost his draft stock. He might have hurt it a little bit because he was banged up all year. You hate to see it when a guy does that. When Cedric, when he chose to come back when he didn't have to. And so I think opting out of the Orange Bowl this is a case where, again, it's best for everybody. It's best for Tennessee because, like you said, he wasn't as much of a factor this year anyway, and he's not fully healthy, so he won't be. I just don't think he'll be as good as Ramel Keaton or Brew McCoy at wideout in the game. It helps Tennessee work with Keaton and McCoy more for first team reps, and it's good for Tillman because he wants to get right for the NFL draft, and so it makes sense across the board for everybody for him to opt out.
Yeah, I think it does. Again, I don't think Tennessee didn't really need him this season. I think that they were, that they had plenty of talent in wide receiver position. Jalen Hyatt came out of pretty much nowhere to be the Blitnikoff winner. Did amazing things. People couldn't stop him. I know I watched many of his games, and he was great. As far as Cedric Tillman goes, what do you think he's going to do in the draft? Like, where do you think he'll go? Do you think that this year severely hurt him? Will he be out of, I would say, second round right now?
Yeah, I see him as a third rounder. I think this injury, it's not nagging, like it's not like a permanent. It's not like you look at this injury and you're like, oh, he's done forever. And people might see he's lost a step. I think people, if you really watch Cedric Tillman, wasn't really a beat you off the step anyway type of receiver. He was a win one-on-one matchups and play physical type of receiver, and he still has that in him. And so, funny enough, I see some can't believe I'm saying this, oh my gosh, but I see some Juwan Jennings in him to a certain degree. Whereas like Juwan Jennings was a receiver where, if you remember, after he got drafted in 2020, he got cut from the 49ers roster at first. The reason is there was no preseason, so because of COVID, so you can only see what he did in practice. Well, Jennings is like a physical, dog. He's got those ball instincts and those instincts with the ball in his hand and the ability to fight for passes, and that doesn't necessarily show up in the just general day-to-day fundamentals of playing receiver in practice. And so I think Tillman is that type of receiver. So I think scouts will see that, and someone's going to still believe in him and take a chance on him. And this ain't the first time Cedric Tillman will have to overachieve if he falls. I mean, the guy was a 2-star recruit on Rivals in 2018. And so Keaton was a more highly touted receiver coming in 2019, funny enough, and Tillman ended up being the star wideout of the two. No sliding against Keaton. I'm a fan of his, but he should be fine.
I think that's why I look at recruiting and I look at 5 stars, 4 stars, all that stuff. I don't buy into a lot of it. I don't buy into a lot of it just because, I did the research, and a lot of these 3 stars end up being really, really good. And some of these 5 stars don't even make it. Like they just out.
Yeah, it's more accurate than it's not. To be fair, it's really hard what these recruiting ratings are doing. You're taking thousands of kids from thousands of high schools across the country, and you have to analyze their potential, the level of competition they're facing. You have these camps now there, and there's just so many. I don't think it's physically possible to accurately. I don't think there's enough bandwidth to accurately analyze every single athlete out there.
I agree.
And I think a lot of, they do a lot of the basing off what schools have offered. And so, if Alabama offers a kid, his star rating's going up because the services will be like, well, if Alabama offered him, there must be something there.
Yeah.
And, but then, it's very much like the NFL. The NFL, if you track history, like first round players are historically better than second round players, historically better than third round, but you don't get them all right. I mean, you're going to miss on guys all the time. And there's, so it's hard. And I think, they can only go on potential with the recruiting services. So that's where it comes on to the coaches. Fulmer missed on some of these guys all the time. I cannot tell you how many star recruits in the early 2000s Fulmer missed on, from just naming some guys, Brandon Jeffries, Chris Donald, it was it's really hard to tell. Level of competition is part of it. But Tillman coming from Vegas, Nevada's not like known as a high school football hub at all. So I think they held that against him to a certain degree. Gets to
Yeah,
Rocky Top.
I think sometimes people get it wrong.
Right.
I mean, sometimes when people put so much stock into, oh, we have 5 stars or what have you, it's like, yeah, but that's these kids coming right out of high school. Like, they're coming right out of high school. You don't know, they're 17 years old when they're starred. You don't know what they're going to do. And I think when you put 2-star, 3-star on a player, that puts that chip on their shoulder, and they strive to get better. I don't know if Cedric Tillman would be as good as he is now if he wasn't ranked with 2 stars. Like, if he was ranked 4-star, maybe he wouldn't have tried as hard. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. And honestly, funny enough, when the staff change happened, because Jeremy Pruitt targeted Cedric Tillman. To his credit, funny enough, Pruitt really wanted Tillman, and he and the new staff targeted him. When Pruitt was fired and Heupel and them came in, Tillman really thought about transferring. He just thought there wasn't going to be a spot in him for him. That year, everybody was talking about Jalen Hyatt already as the next star. And as we know, Hyatt you talk about being high versus low rating. Hyatt was a victim of being a highly touted recruit. I think it made him not take that year as seriously as he should have. And luckily he refocused, and that opened the door for Tillman, who I can't remember why, but just, in a 50-50 coin flip, decided to stay at Tennessee with Heupel, and it worked out big for him. So, Tennessee doesn't have the 2021 season it has without Tillman. And that 2021 season, this past season doesn't happen without that 21 season. I think that we sometimes look at 7-6 or 8-5 seasons and say those are forgettable, but I'm like, guys, a lot of times those seasons lay the foundation for what comes. 1994, Tennessee went 8-4. It was, Fulmer will tell you, it was one of his favorite teams he ever coached because they were loaded with freshmen that year. And then the next 4 years, you had the Peyton Manning years, and then the national championship with Team Martin. 1988, they went 5-6. They started 0-6 in 88. Then won their final 5 games, and Fulmer and Johnny Majors would have told you that was one of their favorite teams because they stayed together, fought to the end, and that the next 16 years were the greatest 16-year run of the modern era of Tennessee football. So,
historian Caleb Calhoun, the historian over here. Speaking of the best run of college football or what have you, Zoll Beer. Zoll Beer will be your best run of beer, craft beer in Knoxville, located downtown on East 5th. Great beer. If you haven't stopped by, you like sours, you like light beers, you like IPAs, you can get it all there at Zoll Beer. And go to zollbeer.com. So, Caleb, where do you think, let's just play around here. Where do you think Cedric Tillman could end up in the NFL?
Like what?
Good morning, Joey. Yes.
That's something I gotta think about. But
where would he be a good fit?
Well, so that's a tough one. That is something I've got to think about. It's funny because I just named San Francisco, but I could definitely see him in San Francisco. Funny enough, they need another.
I could see him in New England.
You could see him in New England.
Yes.
My thing with New England is, they are still, even with Tom Brady gone, New England's still very big on the tight ends and the very complex route running. They have like 3 route options that most of the receivers have to play, and they have to be on the same page as a quarterback when they make those decisions. We don't know if Tillman can do that. I'm not saying he can't, but that wasn't on display at Tennessee. The options are very, very simple for receivers at Tennessee. The offense is not that complex that Heupel runs. And so it's possible, but we haven't seen it yet. Maybe
Joey says Dallas.
Dak Prescott throwing to Tillman, I could see that. What about Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence? That they're kind of coming on now, and Lawrence has the big arm, and so, I mean,
or the Titans, they
or the
certainly need
Titans.
help.
I actually, they need help elsewhere. I think Titans will actually be fine at receiver. Robert Woods and Treylon Burks was hot take, everybody. The A.J. Brown trade, I love A.J. Brown. I thought he was Tennessee's best player last year, but you don't pay a receiver that amount of money. And if you think you can get a better one in the draft, or not a better one, but a comparable one in the draft, I think they got one for the future in Treylon Burks. I don't think they should have fired John Robinson, but that was just me. Yeah, I think Todd Downing and Mike Vrabel are a lot more to blame than John Robinson. John Robinson was one who drafted Derrick Henry and found A.J. Brown. So, but I would say, yeah, Dallas. I could see Dallas. I'm going to go Jacksonville though. Him and Trevor Lawrence be a building block for the future of a passing game. That's for him as a number one. I don't know if Cedric Tillman's a number one receiver in the NFL, honestly, but
he could be.
He
could never know.
Anything's possible.
Cordero Patterson is a running back now, so really anything is possible in the NFL.
Yeah, this is so new. 10 years into the league, he becomes a running back. Like, running backs' careers are usually over by 30 or like by 27, honestly.
Yeah, maybe they've started something new here. Maybe they just put you as a punt returner and wide receiver for a little bit and then shift you into running back.
That's the move.
Apparently that's the move. I mean, I could see Tillman. What about Detroit? Not really. Detroit though.
I mean, I think Tillman could benefit from big arms to a certain quarterbacks with big arms because he's kind of a deep threat to win those one-on-one balls. Jared Goff just, I mean, he doesn't have the biggest arm out there. But so that's the only thing. Tillman needs somebody who can kind of float the deep ball pretty good. And so that I don't think Jared Goff fits into that category. If Matthew Stafford was still there. I'm sorry.
I said, what about the Rams?
Yeah, I was going to say, oh my gosh, Baker Mayfield to Cedric Tillman next year, Super Bowl.
What about that though? What about Baker? People, I've gone for a while and said, I just don't see, I don't see how you just pick like 17 quarterbacks in a row that are wrong as far as Cleveland's concerned. Like, I don't see how statistically that's even possible that you can pick that many quarterbacks that are just busts. I'm starting more and more and more to see that Cleveland is probably the problem and maybe Carolina's the problem. Maybe Baker's going to the Rams and, I mean, he looked great.
Yeah, I'm pumping the brakes. I say this as someone who did believe in Baker Mayfield and
I never did.
Who kind of got proven wrong. But yeah, I did. But I will say that Rams game, I always pump the brakes off. How many NFL quarterbacks have one good game where, defensive coordinators hadn't really prepared for them yet. And they did it against the Raiders, who just the Raiders lost to Jeff Saturday the first week he was coaching the Colts. And so I'm holding off on it now. I will say Baker has that. I know you don't like the arrogance, but it kind of translates to some fourth quarter moxie every now and then. I remember it because his breakout game, as we all know, to tie it to Tennessee, was 2015 Oklahoma-Tennessee. Tennessee leads 17-0, and Baker Mayfield, in like his second start, leads Oklahoma back to win that game. And couldn't help but give him credit for the way he played in that second half. Butch Jones also coached that game away. That's I don't know how many times I said that the last 3 years of Butch Jones' tenure, but he definitely, that was the game where Butch Jones got mad at Eric Stryker for Oklahoma on the other side for like talking a bunch of trash, which like, I get it if you don't like somebody talking trash, but if you're a coach, it's not your job to lecture an opposing team's player on how much trash they should talk. Like that's their coach's job. So,
yes. Like, what are you doing, Butch Jones? But I think that was a whole big headache for everybody at Tennessee for the most part, the Butch Jones era. I think at one point everyone wanted to throw the bricks at Butch Jones.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Brick by brick, inches make the chain. And he forgot to put cement between the bricks, and so they all came crumbling down. And so, that's my horrible analogy.
Well, they were champions of life. So.
Oh, champions of life, 5-star hearts. Speaking of recruiting, Amanda, you were playing the 5-star hearts card a little while ago when you were talking about recruiting.
My gosh, that whole thing was terrible. Was so terrible. Did you see last night Kyler Murray though went down, torn ACL, out for the season?
Season-ending injury. You're seeing so many more of these with quarterbacks nowadays, which and it's funny, it just happened with Hendon Hooker, and Hooker's was a fluke, non-contact, just freak accident. But it's wild how, I mean, when I was growing up, quarterbacks got hurt. I don't really remember a season-ending torn ACL to a high-profile quarterback, growing up in the 90s or 2000s. I'm trying to think. I've seen injuries, but I saw more concussions with quarterbacks. Troy Aikman is a classic example, but maybe this is with the new rules. You're going to see more torn ACLs. And this is a Landry question. Would you rather have a torn ACL or a concussion? I mean, that's...
I mean, I agree. I think if was it Larry Fitzgerald? He would pay other like opposing defensive players not to hit him in the head or the legs. He would pay them not to hit him in the legs.
Oh, he would? I think I did hear about that.
Yeah, he would, or at least tell them. I'm not sure if he would pay them, but I think he offered to pay them. Just don't hit me
pay their
in
fines.
the legs.
Yeah.
Yes.
He basically said if they hit him high, he would pay their fines.
Yes. Yeah. Do not hit me in the legs. Do not hit me in the knees, because those are what he needed, to succeed in the NFL. And I thought that was pretty genius of him. And that's the reason is he still playing, or did he finally call it quits?
Is he still playing? I thought he called it quits. Yeah, he called it quits.
Okay.
Yeah, he called it quits, I think, in 2020. Yeah, 2020 was his last year. But one receiver, by the way, who should have been a Heisman winner in 2003, if you wanted to make a case for him over Jason White, since we were talking about that, Larry Fitzgerald. That was the Eli Manning year, too. Eli Manning was up for the Heisman that year. But, yeah. Maybe that's who Cedric Tillman could mirror. I'm kidding. I'm not going to say he's not. I'm not saying he's the next Larry Fitzgerald, guys. Don't accuse me of that.
Breaking. Caleb Calhoun says that Cedric Tillman is the next Larry Fitzgerald here on Off the Hook Sports.
No, my bold prediction was last week. I said last week. Were you on? I said last week that Tennessee will win the national championship in 2024.
Yes, I was on for that, and I sat there for a minute and just kind of
really say much. All very realistic about things. I think next year is going to disappoint a lot of fans. Tennessee is going to suffer a couple of bad losses. Rebuilding year, 2024 national title. Book it. You heard it here first. Put money on it now if you can.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot. That's a big. If I'm taking Tennessee or the field in 2024, I'm taking the field.
Yeah, but the field won't pay you as much as if you take Tennessee, and Tennessee's going to win
it. What? Okay, so what makes you think Tennessee's going to win it in 2024?
Okay, a couple of things. One, I don't think they're going to have a Power 5 non-conference foe, which is a big deal. So the schedule's much easier. And the reason they're not going to have a Power 5 foe is because they had Oklahoma scheduled. The SEC forced them to cancel their home-and-home with Oklahoma because Oklahoma is joining the SEC. I don't think Tennessee is going to be able to replace Oklahoma with a Power 5 opponent in time. And the SEC has a requirement that you have to play one Power 5 foe every year non-conference. But Tennessee could come back to the SEC and be like, well, we tried. You guys made us cancel this game. So, I mean, no Power 5 foe for us. Alabama and Florida are back at home. The schedule's much, much easier. I think that by 2024, you have a transition. You have a lot of bit of roster turnover that's happening next year. You won't have as much in 2024, and you will be settled at quarterback at 2024, whether that's Nico, whether that's Steven Jackson, whether that's somebody Heupel finds in the portal. You're inevitably going to have better play at quarterback in 2024 than you're going to have in 2023. 2024 is when I think Tennessee's first top 5 recruiting class is going to come. And I say that because they were still a little hamstrung for 2023 because you start building the 2023 class after the 2021 season. And at that point, Tennessee had one 7-6 season, was still under NCAA investigation. So they were still a bit behind the 8 ball for the 2023 class. They won't be for 2024 at all. And there will be a lot of guys that can come in and make an immediate impact. So the schedule, quarterback play will be better, less attrition, more talent. If they could go 10-2 this year, yeah, it's going to be a 12-team playoff. So Tennessee is going to win the SEC and national title that year. So that would result in them playing 15 games because they'd get the bye in the first. Yeah, 16 games. Because they would get a first round bye. So in the playoffs. So yeah, I'm going to say they will go 16-1 in 2024. Book it.
Jeez. Where's the one loss?
They're going to beat Georgia in Georgia that year. I'm calling that too. So the one loss will be some sort of shocking fluke loss. It might be their SEC West foe on the road that year. I don't know exactly who they play on the road. I can look that up real quick. But it could be, who do they play on the road from the West that year? They play Mississippi State on the road. So they'll slip up and they might lose that game, or they might lose
State.
You can slip up, or you know what'll happen? They'll lose to Alabama at home and then beat them in the SEC title in a rematch. That's what's going to happen.
Okay, I could see that. So you're telling people to bank on it, right?
Bank on it. You guys want to get rich. You guys want to be swimming in cash. You want to be able to in January of 2025. Do you want to be like, thank God I listened to Caleb. I have completely I'm made out for the rest of my life because of listening to him. Do it. 2024.
So Caleb's given financial advice, but he is no Guardian Investments, where you can actually have a financial strategy given to you by the best in the business. If you want to know more about, anything money-wise, anything related to that, go to Guardian Investments, and they can help get you on track. Good morning, Orange Blood. When we return, we have Coach Landry with us, and we will talk more. So get your questions ready. Get, Tennessee questions. Get any questions around college football or the NFL when we come back.
Has risen to the highest level in over 40 years, according to the April 2022 U.S. Inflation Calculator. Will your investments provide you the income you need in retirement? Are you losing purchasing power of your savings due to inflation? Simply stated, if the cost of goods and services are 8% higher and you're only earning 4% in your investments, that money buys you less of what you need. Right now is the time to act. Call Guardian Investment Advisors today.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here. I want to personally invite you to North Knoxville's newest sports bar and restaurant.
It's Big Orange Phillies, located in Black Oak Center. And yes folks, it's happening in Halls. Big Orange Phillies offers family-friendly environment with homemade meals and the best deli-style subs around. Billiards, darts, jukebox, shuffleboard, and cornhole, and a full bar. We also offer valet parking on weekends and during special events. We even have a covered back patio. It's happening at Big Orange Phillies. We want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
This is Al's Dish Barbecue Supply, so come on in and see all the different rubs and sauces we have, plus a complete line of Green Mountain grills. Don't be overwhelmed. We have plenty of help so you can produce the best barbecue and amaze your family and friends. Barbecue is America's food. We'll do what we can to bring you all the best products. We're Al's Nest Barbecue, but Chattanooga goes to grill.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. with a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctieyes.com.
Good morning, Coach Landry. How are you?
Good morning. How you guys doing?
We are doing well. Oh, Caleb left. Caleb's back. Let's move you in the middle here, Coach Landry. So we want to start off with our, deepest. I know that you probably were very close or are very close to Mike Leach. Probably not the best situation right now. So we are very, very sorry about what's happening. I don't know what the latest on Coach Leach is, but again, our condolences to you for that.
I want to jump in actually.
Okay.
Mississippi State has just tweeted like 3 minutes ago or 8 minutes ago that Mike Leach has passed.
God
It
bless.
looks like it is confirmed. I'm this is an awful day, so I'm sorry. Finish, Amanda.
So just that's absolutely horrible, and I'm so sorry. Because I mean, he was my favorite coach, even being not a Mississippi State fan, but he was absolutely great, and that is so disheartening and so terrible. So my apologies.
Yeah, it's been a numbing couple of days. I think the shock value is pretty bad. I talked to him Thursday. So it's really hard to process when things happen this quickly. And as I get a little older and you deal with loss of parents and loss of loved ones and loss of friends, and there's no good way to handle this. I've dealt with with people who've been sick and you've had time to prepare, and then there's the shocking nature of this. I knew Mike was dealing with some issues during the season, pneumonia-wise. You can never be prepared for this. So Sunday night I was obviously shocked, and the initial thought was, well, they'll get the care and take care of. But it was pretty clear yesterday that things were not going to end in the miraculous fashion that we had all hoped. It's ironic because I was watching. I had a coaching buddy from LSU that came and watched the Army-Navy game with me Saturday, and we were discussing something that you guys probably wouldn't remember this, but there's a good friend by the name of Bo Ryan that he was a coach at North Carolina State, and he replaced Charlie McClendon at LSU. And if name doesn't ring a bell to most of you, he never coached at LSU. And we were discussing this because this mutual friend was around and remembered this. And I don't know why, I can't remember how it came up, but Bo Ryan died in a plane crash. He was on a recruiting trip, and his plane went down the Atlantic Ocean, and they never found the plane or anything. And I don't know why that came up on Saturday, and then little did I know, about 12 hours later, this happened. And the thing about it is this happens every day to someone's family, and it's always difficult when it's people that And I think Mike is someone that everybody feels, and coaches feel like they know him, any public figure. So I'm not doing a really good job of collecting my words, because I was anticipating this. But yeah, it's he was such a it's hard to talk about him in past tense. He was such a unique guy, because he and I were like two completely different. I was football all the time, and I always thought Mike liked football, and he really did. He loved football, loved coaching, but he had so many more interests. Um, and he was so quirky. When I had my heart surgery, I had an aortic valve replacement, and it anyway, a few friends and I was calling check on him. When he called, he wanted to know what type of valve was. Is it a pig valve? Is this? And I'm like, no, it was a mechanical valve, and so he was just fascinated. So 2 days later, he calls me back and he says, and he has this, I'm telling you guys, 20-minute conversation about my Onyx mechanical valve. Do you know was developed in Germany, and it was this and that? And I got up and said, Mike, I now know more about my valve than my cardiologist and my surgeon did. So he was that type of guy. He would be like, if he were here, he'd want to know, all about you guys, Amanda and your beautiful future and blessings in your life, and what's going on, and what have you done, and what did you study, and you were born in Nashville. And I did, and he would just, and Caleb, he'd want to know, like, well, what are you doing? What's your goals? He was a guy that he was an everyman's guy. We're in a world of coaches today are followed by 3 and 4 policemen. Mike would just not want any part of that. He would walk in and just sit down and talk, and just, how's it going, guys? What are we talking about? And he would just envelop the conversation. I had a friend of mine was on a staff at Washington State, and he lived in Pullman. I don't know if you guys ever been to Pullman, Washington. It reminds me a little bit of Starkville, but even Washington State is Pullman. Pullman is Washington State. It's like this little town that you don't really know, and you go up on a hill, and there's Washington State, and that's it. He walked to work every day because he lived that close. And he wasn't like a really early or stay at late to the office type of guy. So they meet, I don't know, say like 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, there's this one morning as a coaching staff, they're waiting, and it's 8:30. It's 9 o'clock. No one knows where Mike is. Mike gets in, and he tells them the story. He was walking to work, and he saw this, what appeared to be a family of raccoons. And so he decided to wander off into the woods to see what they would do and where they would go and all of that. That's quintessential Mike. It's like he could be easily distracted into doing his things. Anyway, I'm rambling. I apologize. But, yeah.
No, I love it. I love hearing these stories about him. It seems like he was exactly how he was portrayed, exactly how he was in the media. It seems like he was exactly that way in real life too.
And not many coaches are. I always laugh sometimes. It's like, well, yeah, if you only knew, but you I can tell you out there, you knew Mike Leach. I mean, what you saw is what you got. He was interested in what you were doing. You driving a truck, you were a financial planner, you're a politician, you whatever. He went in, this was long before he became president, but he decided he wanted to learn something from Donald Trump. So he made an appointment, and he waited. This was when he was at Texas Tech, I believe. And he just going to New York, and he said, you know what? I want to go and meet Donald Trump. So he went, and he waited in the lobby and all of that, and he waited, and he got to know Donald Trump. And he, of course, got a lot of heat for a lot of his political stances, but he just didn't care what people thought. He was Mike.
Chris, I want to get a little bit of, talking a little bit about his legacy. I mean, in 1997, he and Hal Mummy together come to Kentucky with Tim Couch. And really, they had been running this air raid for about 8 years now at Iowa Wesleyan and Valdosta State, and just take the college football world by storm running it at Kentucky, and turned Tim Couch into a #1 draft pick. One of my earliest memories growing up watching Tennessee was Peyton Manning and Tim Couch just playing Tennessee ended up winning in a blowout, but it was Peyton Manning's best passing game because Tim Couch kept forcing him and the Vols to keep throwing it. Can you talk a little bit about just the way they just shocked the college football world when they brought that into the mainstream?
Yeah, Mike. So Mike never played football, which is really unusual. He played rugby. And it's where he met Sharon at Brigham Young. He played rugby, intramural rugby. And he went to law school. And he went to Pepperdine. But he never took the bar. He was intoxicated by football. And he mainly was intoxicated by what they were doing at BYU. Lavelle Edwards. Back in the day when everybody around the country, it wasn't a Big Ten thing. It was everybody was running the football, and they were throwing it all across the yard at BYU. I mean, it was, that's what they did. And so he began to study that. And then you're right. Hal Mumme is the inventor of the air raid, and it was at Iowa Wesleyan. And because I actually been Iowa Wesleyan, and then they believed in it. He learned it from him. Mike was very smart, and he believed in it. He believed in, we're going to spread you horizontally, and we're going to throw it. And instead of, worrying about handoffs, and we're going to throw the short pass, and we're going to work the ball down the field. And they formulated their plan. And obviously, Hal, you mentioned Valdosta State, and they went there. So, he grew up and became, was a great player and became a GA and worked it. That's not how he did it. He did it at the grassroots where people didn't know. And it was he and Hal, and he kind of took it, and they went to Valdosta, you mentioned, at Kentucky. And it was interesting to watch them do things. And he had that first meeting with Tim Couch, and he said, we're going to throw it 50 times a game, and you're going to love it. And Tim Couch was a highly rated, 5-star guy that, everybody wanted, but he was an in-state guy. And they convinced him, no better way to go. We're going to throw it 1,000,000 times and come here. And so the rest of this is history. He goes to Oklahoma, Mike does, and it's really only 1 year, and does a very good job there for Bob Stoops. And when they began to kind of spread it out, and the Jason Whites and all those guys. And then from there, he got the Texas Tech job. And I think people kind of know his career from that point over at Washington State. And his ability to take, quarterbacks and take what they do. He was stubborn. He was stubborn. God bless him. He believed in it, which is great. And he just didn't vary from that at all. He just, he was going to do his, and I think it sometimes was a little bit flawed, and why sometimes you'd see him, have a lot of success and pull upsets, but then he'd lose certain games because I think people would figure out you can't play man, you can't play straight man, you can't play straight zone. And if you could kind of crack that code, the other thing that was difficult, he had to have that guy, that quarterback that really was experienced. And, the interesting thing about their routes, there are very few plays in that offense, but they will practice. They'll have 6 or 8 routes, and they practice it, guys, like over and over and over. And I went to a practice one time at 2 hours in the spring, and they worked 2 routes. 2 hours over and over. Well, what they did was based upon, they didn't call the route in the huddle. The route was based upon the coverage. So it really relied upon having the symbiotic relationship of being able to see things the same from the quarterback and the receiver position. Very unique offense, as you might expect from a very, very unique individual.
Yeah, it was. And that's where you saw them. And I noticed that too. That's why I felt like at Washington State in particular, it was about 4 years before the things really took off. And I realized, it was because the quarterback and receiver have to have some chemistry and always be on the same page. And
yeah, because, think about it. I mean, it's not just where to throw it, but it's like based upon that coverage. Now you got to run a slant or a post or a flag route. What if you run the wrong one? You got a mess. And there are times where it was a mess. And but it took some time to work that together.
Yeah, it's just a rough day for, I think, his family, for everybody right now. Just innocent culprit saying Mike Leach should get the cover of NCAA 23. That would definitely be a tribute to him. That would be, that would. Oh, so sorry. I don't handle stuff like this very well.
I don't think any of us do, Amanda. It's particularly when it's a shock. I don't know words, but he's got 4 kids. My understanding they were coming from. I don't know if the daughter was still living in Vancouver or not. I kind of lost track. So my understanding, they all were able to get in and be there as a family. And of course, Sharon is an angel, his wife, and obviously my thoughts are with them now. And it's going to be, it's really tough for the Mississippi State family and the SEC as a whole, and in college football, because he wasn't an SEC lifer. I mean, he had the background at Texas Tech and the background at Washington State, and he was so the media, loved him because he was a soundbite waiting to happen, and it's going to be as we go into, and no good time we go into the holiday season and going to the bowls and the crescendo of the college season. He'll be, I'm sure, celebrated and talked about. And it's still really hard to believe that it's true.
So having to think about what they have to do now, I mean, you hate to go here. It's no easy transition, but Mississippi State does have a bowl game. They have to hire, they have to figure out their future on their own now. Turns out, I was just reading the news, Zach Arnett, defensive coordinator, has been named interim head coach. I don't know if you know anything about him. He was defensive coordinator, but
yeah.
Mike Leach was the offensive coordinator too. So it's not like they can just so easily maintain this offense.
I don't, and football is not the most important thing, but you're right. So what do they do? I mean, I would imagine that in the bowl game, my guess is Steve Spurrier Jr. will probably call the plays. Not that that's,
right. It's
important now, but I mean, that's just from a football standpoint. I don't, I'm telling you, it's one of those sensitive things, as an athletic director and as president, you always think about, well, what happens if you got to make a change? But now it's just such a different and sensitive issue that, I don't know what they do and when they do it. And then it's probably one of those times where, the players, the support staff, I mean, that's a family. I mean, that is an extended family that you deal with every day. And, guys, it's just, he was at practice Saturday.
Yeah.
He was at practice he was at a function of some sort Saturday night. And, he's gone. So the shock of that, everything we talked about, the everybody's dealing with. Well, they're dealing with it as a Mississippi State family, as a football family. So, I mean, it's everybody, the administrative assistants, secretaries, and the trainers, and everybody that part of that family is having to deal with that now. So how do you deal with that as you get ready to play a bowl game against Illinois? And it's just a lot of things they've got to unravel before they make some difficult decisions. But yeah, I mean, life goes on, but there's a healing process and a mourning process that always takes place for everybody, and that'll be the case for Mississippi State and everybody involved.
Yeah, Amanda, I take from Alabama's. I take from Nick Saban. Funny enough, on this, you're right. It's brutal. It's awful. I remember, Chris, when Nick Saban was being interviewed, Alabama had a game against Florida State as Hurricane Harvey was wrecking Houston, and there were some players in Alabama from Houston worried about their families, and they had to go play a game. And Saban's analogy, he told a story about when he was young, he had broken up with his girlfriend, and much more benign, obviously, nowhere near as serious as a hurricane or a death. But he said he had broken up with his girlfriend, and he was very sad for breaking up with his girlfriend. And because he was sad, he lashed out at a customer at his store that he worked at for his dad. And his dad came to him and asked what happened. And he said his girlfriend broke up. And his dad said, well, you got one problem right now. Your girlfriend broke up with you. But if you keep acting this way because of that, if you let it affect you, you're going to have 3 problems. Because 1, your girlfriend broke up with you. 2, I'm going to fire you for lashing out at the customers. And then 3, I'm going to beat you for getting fired. And it was one of those, he said, it's kind of a philosophy I've lived by on life since then, where it's like you can have one problem or you can have multiple problems, and it's brutal to just. This is obviously a much more difficult situation to deal with, obviously, because you're.
Yeah, I really can't. I was trying to think yesterday. My mind went there that I don't know if you guys remember Randy Walker was at Northwestern and he died of a heart attack as head coach. I had a good friend, Greg Knapp, who 2 years ago was an assistant with the Niners, was riding his bike right before training camp and got hit by a vehicle and died. I'm trying to think of how many times this has happened, and it's
Rex Dockery at Memphis State in
Rex,
83.
yeah, in Rex, that's right, in 83. I mean, the most awful mass tragedy was in 72. I remember, you guys would remember, you sure heard about it, Marshall. Plane crashed in every, but there's and I mentioned Bo Ryan. It just, the shock of that is, we've seen guys get sick and step away, and but the sharp, quick, nature of this makes it's just difficult to wrap your head around it, I think, for a lot of folks.
Yeah. And such a big personality that I think that's it. That's also, he's larger than life, literally. And it's rough. But again, our prayers are with his family and his friends and his team and all the decisions going forward, because they're going to be very difficult ones that they have to make, and unfortunately time sensitive ones. But yeah, so if Chris, if you don't mind, if we can,
sure,
get I'm teary-eyed. We were talking about Cedric Tillman earlier.
Yeah.
And he's planning to forego, the bowl and go ahead and prepare for the NFL draft. What kind of player is he, and what kind of player would somebody in the NFL be getting with Cedric Tillman?
Well, obviously, he's a very talented guy, and he's going to have a good future at the next level. Dealing with some injuries this year affected his productivity, but he's got the skill set to play. I think he's got a lot of polish to his game. I think, in this offense, there's always an adjustment from college to the NFL and learning the entire route tree. And so those are things that he'll have to grow and develop on. But he does a good job of stemming his route, meaning, getting defenders on their back heels and breaking the route off very effectively. He's got a really good awareness of understanding coverages for his age. So I think he's got a good future. Not playing in bowl games have just become one of those things that they happen. I'm, not a big fan of it, but I understand it now, and I've come to just accept that that's just the way it's going to be. But yeah, he's got a nice future, and curious to see in a lot of these bowl games as they kick off this weekend is how many will be playing. The sometimes skeleton crew of, because not only we got guys declaring, but we got guys transferring. I mean, it's like, who's actually going to line up for South Carolina? I mean, it's like, all these, we got it, they're coming and going. So it's like grab a roster, an updated roster before you watch those games at your holiday party, because you're going to say, who's that? Because in a lot of these cases, a lot of these guys are not going to be playing, and a lot of guys that were deep down on the depth chart will be.
Yeah, Chris, I wanted to know what your thoughts are as a coach. Amanda and I kind of debated this yesterday, funny enough, on players opting out, because I don't have as much of a problem with it. And the reason I said it, I actually think if they're going to the NFL and the bowl game's not a playoff game, you're not playing for a national championship, I think to a degree it's actually a win-win. And I think it's a win-win because I think the player gets to focus on the draft, but I also think the coaches get to start working with the backups who would be in competition to replace them next year anyway, and they can give them some first team reps. And my example to Amanda, and I'm sure you know the story, that I think the best thing that ever happened for Team Martin was when Peyton Manning was hurt between the SEC title and the national and the Orange Bowl against Nebraska. He took most of the first team reps, and if he hadn't taken those first team reps, I'm not sure he would have been ready to play in '98.
Yeah, I think that's the way you have to handle it. You have to say, okay, if we're not competing, and this is what's happened right with the playoffs, right? It's the playoffs are about this year. Who's going to win the title this year? Let's just call it what it is. It used to be, the Orange Bowl, Tennessee and Clemson are playing. That kind of finishes the season, and it's important who wins it and this and that. Well, what it is, it's basically become the first game of next year. But, because you're playing guys that are going to be there. Although with the transfer portal, you don't even know that. You got guys that may play in the ball and leave. So it used to be that you could look at the bowl games and get a strong indicator for what you had coming back. Who was going to be, where you're in. But now it's not so much. It is something that, okay, yeah, well, the veteran guys are moving on and they're playing, and they're not going to be part of the future if they're a senior or if they're going to the draft. Well, then, let the other guys play, because those are the guys we're building to the future. That's the way you got to look at it. It's why, though, and we're going to see it maybe a little bit, I think, evolve when we go to the playoffs, because when we have an expanded playoffs, because you're going to have more teams playing, and the assumption is that obviously those players that are going to be playing in the playoffs are going to show up and play. I think these, I would think, although there's some sentiment that with NIL and what have you, that some of those guys may say, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to play. That would be real controversial if they start. Can you imagine if somebody said that Georgia, I'm not going to play. I'm just not going to play. That would be, but that's where we were a few years ago when they stopped playing in bowl games. I've always felt like, guys, that, and I understand where we're headed towards the playoffs. I always felt like, because if you go back a long time ago, bowl games didn't even count. They would announce the national champion before the bowl games.
Yep.
The bowl games were an exhibition. And then they evolved into, well, let's just take the bowl games and then, factor that into who's voted number one. And then I've always felt like that the best way to go about it would be to use the bowl games as an extension of the regular season. So make December for college football what March is for college basketball, and put the best teams in the best bowl games, and then pick the 4 teams after that, or 2.
I've been a fan of a +1 for years. Yeah.
So just so that way you would, and I'm not saying using it as a playoff. I'm saying have the bowl games and then pick 4 after. So maybe it could be like, if it would put a team in it like the matchups might be a little different, but say a Tennessee or a Clemson, maybe one of them wins decisively, and maybe based upon that, they get into the playoffs. My point is you can't control your conference schedule. You can control your out of conference schedule, but you deal with them so far advanced. But here's what we do know. Every year, there are teams that are better or not as good as we thought they would be. Well, then use the bowl games to take the best teams that had the best seasons and put them in bowl games, and then pick the teams after that. You'd still have controversy who should get in. But if you want to truly know who's better and who's not, then put them in those games. Well, the whole point, it would make the bowls that much more intriguing, the December bowls. And then I think you get more guys playing because more at stake and what have you. But I think we're still early in the NIL, quote unquote, transfer portal era, to where I'm hoping that this is not the case, but I'm afraid that we might have guys begin to opt out of playoff games in the future. At least it's a lot of people think that happens. I think that's going to take what's happening now. I think all of us will say, man, that's going to really suck, when they start doing that. If they do it. Hope not.
Yeah, that's going to be. I didn't even think about them opting out of playoff games, but I could definitely see that happening with the NIL in play. Though, do you think that they should be allowed to do that? I mean, considering they're getting paid.
I think what needs to happen now that we're going down this path. I mean, I talked about what I would have done. That's not going to happen, so there's no sense in wasting time on that. I think we're going to have some sort of a college football collective bargaining agreement, a players association and the schools, because you can't have it just willy-nilly that they can pick up and leave. They can do whatever they want. They can get NIL money, but they don't have to play. So you got to have some rules, and a collectively bargain agreement with where you say this is what you can do and you can't do. You got this window to transfer. You can't, you're obligated to, I think it's fine for players to get some of their own deal, but I think there needs to be some tie-in. If you're going to get paid and you're going to have access to making money in name, image, and likeness, great. I believe, though, as schools, as you take money in collectives and you disperse it among the players, I think there needs to be some obligations, whatever that is, whatever you want to make it, to be, it needs to be put in so that, they're obligated to maybe play a bowl game, or they're not, or obligated for the playoffs. Whatever it is you need to do, you need to have rules. I mean, we got to have rules. It's just in anything you do. And the lack of organization is really what's causing problems. But it's they're adding this and adding that, and then they realize, we got better have a rule on that. So I hope that we get to that point. The powers that be can put that together, because I think that's going to be imperative. So I think a collective bargaining agreement, obviously in the NFL, that's kind of been what we've dealt with and had to deal with. And a lot of the rules that take place in the NFL about when a guy can declare, when he can't, that's all collectively bargained. I think you can look at that. The other thing I would encourage college guys to look at, and this is a bigger problem with some of these guys are coming out for the NFL draft, and they're not a couple of things. I think some of them could develop their skills further by taking maybe as much as $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 they can get for an NIL deal and stay in school and develop a little bit longer. Because the whole talk is, well, you need to go in sooner so you can get to your second NFL contract. There ain't going to be a second NFL contract if you're not prepared as best you can to perform well in your first contract. So I think we're getting that. But then you're having another group of players. When you see these guys that, boy, they're not likely even going to be drafted and they're declaring, that's because they basically quit school. They're going to be ineligible academically. So they got nowhere to go. And so I think we've got to look at a lot of things and maybe tie it into, look, you can make some name, image, and likeness, but in a collective, you're going to have to be eligible. You're going to have to do your classwork. I mean, I just think you got to protect some of these kids from themselves. And I call them kids. They're young men that it's frustrating to me as a coach. You got an opportunity to go to school, get an education, get everything that you need taken care of for you for free, and to get an education that'll allow you to do something with your life after football, whenever that is, whenever that starts. And on top of that, you can make some now extra money, which is great. But understand that if you've got pro potential, which a lot of these guys that we talk about do, understand that this is the best way to get as much experience as possible. Because I can tell you in the NFL, you don't really have time to develop you. You're better off taking maybe that collective money, being eligible in school, even if it means you entered school early and you get some work towards your graduate degree, whatever, but develop your football skills and make some extra money. I mean, think about that now. If you can make $75,000, you got no expenses. You're not paying rent. You're not paying food. You're not paying for training. You're not paying for anything. So you can, if you do it right, save a lot of it, build a nest egg, help family, whatever you want to do with it. I think there's a greater opportunity now than ever for players. They all think they're going in the first round. I mean, they got 200 guys think they're going in the first round, and they're getting bad advice, and no, I don't want to go to school. I'm not going to class, whatever. And then they got to come out. And then what do? They don't get drafted. They don't have a pro football future. They don't have a college degree. They don't really have enough of an education. They can't get a scholarship now. They're ineligible. Now what? And, if you can get them to understand that, if we can take them into the future and see that, but it's not going to happen to me is kind of what they all think. And I just see that happen every year.
Chris.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Amanda.
Sorry, give me 1 second, Caleb, and you can go for it. As far as protecting their future, we do have Zach England from bestlawhb.com, who is restoring lives and protecting rights. That is what they do at Best and Brock. And they are, free consultation. Just go to their bestlawhb.com. And there you go. Caleb, go for it.
Chris, you brought up something that is, you're right, it's a very scary thought, which is players opting out of playing due to NIL if they're in a playoff, which in like meaningful games, which could happen in the future. I want to know if you, and you can push back on me if you think I'm wrong here, because the reason that doesn't worry me as much is I haven't seen it in March Madness yet. And the other thing is, although NIL is new, but I think there's some examples of players who were somewhat disinterested in college and then waited to go to the NFL or to the NBA. And I think because you know this, you worked in the NFL. You guys, I know y'all care as much. You try your best to study intangibles as much as you do tangibles. And there's some evidence that when players are disinterested in college, that they are not as successful in the pros. I mean, I think Ben Simmons in college basketball was so disinterested that one year he played at LSU. And now we see how much of a bust he's been in the NBA. I think Jadeveon Clowney seemed like he was playing his last season at South Carolina disinterested. He wasn't a bust in the NFL, but was nowhere near what we thought he was going to be in the NFL. And So don't you think that, like, if a player does choose to opt out of a meaningful college game and suspend all competitive fire that they have, that would really work against them in the draft?
It is if it's a pattern. I mean, I think like for example, one of the first ones that kind of were eye-opening was Christian McCaffrey.
Oh yeah.
And he opted out when it was like, whoa, he's opting out of the Sun Bowl. And it was like, well, he certainly was a guy that worked hard, does work hard, is a great player in the NFL. I think if it's a pattern, I think if it's a guy that tends to take the easy way out and maybe, I guess what I'm saying is it's becoming normal now. It's normalized. Look, played hard, worked hard, whatever. I'm just not going to play in the Orange Bowl because, I'm going to prepare for the draft. Again, I don't like it, but I kind of understand it better. What I don't like is kind of guys that you're talking about, that it's been a pattern. So when a guy opts out, and it's an opt out is a nice way of saying, well, he kind of quit. He did quit. I always go to, when I talk with them, I want to really get to know the guy. So tell me what your mindset was. And it's my job to know, is this a guy I can count on? Is this a guy that's going to, basically what you're doing is it's a me thing by saying I'm not going to play and not a we thing. That's not a good thing. But then I also see the side of we're in a different sport than basketball. The injury rate's a lot more significant and it catastrophic potentially. So I think you got to weigh all of that in. If a guy has been the ultimate competitor and he just decides not to opt out in that last bowl game that is not in the playoffs, that's not as considered as bad as back in the day. I would really look harshly at it. I still look at it and say a little bit cross-eyed, and I want to get to know why, but I'm not going to be foolish enough to dismiss a guy because just of that. Because if his pattern says he is a competitor and he's a hard worker and he just out, then you're losing a guy that could be a transformative player at the next level. So I think you got to look at it. I think it's the other thing too is the development part. We don't have a true developmental league. Like the NBA has a developmental league. Hockey has it. Baseball's got minor leagues. We don't have that. Yeah, there's an XFL and a USFL for guys that don't make it into the NFL. They can play, and to some degree, it's a developmental league for the bottom level of your roster, but it's not a true developmental league. And it's just a much more physical sport. It's a greater risk every time you play, and so the development is a big factor. That why these guys say let's not risk it in the bowl game.
Yeah.
That doesn't. I think they mean something, but in the eyes of today's world, it doesn't mean as much as it used to.
So Travis asking, can the NIL not dictate if you have to play in a postseason game, like contractually? And I'm pretty sure the NIL it's not performance based. If I'm not.
It's not performance based. And look, it does depend upon the state and state laws, which is, again, why we need to have this uniform. But you can't just dictate that with an NIL. Now, there are certain things that you can require legally in an NIL agreement, appearances, what you do, and all of that. But here's the other thing, is if you require them to play, then all of a sudden they have these injuries. I'm not healthy to play. This hamstrings tightening. There's got to be certain, again, more than an NIL, individual NIL. You've got to have more of a collectively bargained situation to prevent that, because there are workarounds with that. The injury factor, that used to be the thing. Well, not healthy for the bowl game. Okay, very non-specific, no injuries. You can't question the injury really, but you wonder. Now they don't be the bother to say, yeah, I'm not healthy. It's just, yeah, I'm opting out, because it's like no big deal. But it used to be we used the injury factor as the excuse to not wanting to play in the bowl game. That's the way it was. Because after Christian McCaffrey announced, then it was like he got a lot of criticism. Then the other guy said, well, I'm not healthy. I've got, rehabbing this knee, and I got to focus on semantics. We know what was going on.
And let's be fair, and let's place the blame where it belongs, which is there probably would be a uniform standard and a more effective way of handling this if the NCAA had actually gotten out ahead of it, rather than spending 10 years fighting tooth and nail against this inevitable outcome. And I think that's part of the problem too, isn't it? Couldn't the NCAA have gotten out ahead of this?
It is. The NCAA was by and large kind of toothless on a lot of it. You're right. They were fighting on paying anything or doing anything. I firmly believe that if the powers that be would have looked at this with all the motion towards paying players and doing things that were more transformative, they should have said, in my view, look, let's see about, if we can take money and put it in a fund. They call it collectives now, but whatever you want to call it, and disperse it, increase the stipend for the players. So in addition to getting all the other stuff, they could get a little bit more. And if they did that, then I think we would have slowed down the process of having this. But what they did instead was, well, we'll let them transfer anytime they want. We'll do that. Like that was because they thought that would be, we'll throw them a bone and we'll get them off the, we want pay type thing. And then eventually you're going to lose this in a court of law. That's what happened. People say, well, I can't believe they're lying. Well, they can't. They take it to court. And, the NCAA, they're helpless. They can't do anything. Go to take this to a high court level, and that's it. It's we've spoken. It's done. So the lack of foresight into which, and I understand the concept of the NCAA, and not a lot of schools make as much money as people think because there's a lot of expenses for non-revenue sports, but they should have gotten ahead of it, out in front of it a little bit sooner, so that they could have offset some of this stuff. And because I do think now, people say, well, they ought to do this and that. Why? Players are not going to. They're already getting more than, and they're not going to go back. So it's going to have to be, all right, look, they're going to get this, but we're going to have to organize it. Again, we're going to have to do it in some form of a collectively bargain agreement. That's just what's going to have to happen to create some organizational structure to this.
Yeah. Well, Coach Landry, thank you for coming on with us today. I know we've kept you way past your time, but
I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And again, so sorry for your loss.
Well, it's tough for everybody. And again, appreciate the time. I got a little message as we're going, just as a parting note, that that one of the things Mike apparently had in his living will, whatever, part of the delay on a lot of things was that he donated every organ that he could, a lot of organs to. So just kind of the guy he was. Tough day, but I appreciate you guys having me on as always. God bless. Hug your loved ones.
Yeah. Yes, we definitely will. And we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here, Viles Automotive on Callahan Drive. I've been selling cars here in East Tennessee for 27 years. In that time, I've come to realize it's not about the car. It's about you, the customer. So I'm here to take care of you just like family. Good credit, bad credit, you name it, we can get you taken care of. If we don't have it, we can find it for you. We go across the country to get any vehicle that you want. And here at Viles Automotive, we don't believe in fake numbers. We just give you great deals. And as always, we want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassy Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassy, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassy's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassy Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
This is Steve Rain. I own the Midnight Oil and Michelin Tire Direct service station here in Ottawa. It's not a fancy place, never has been, but it's a clean place with clean restrooms and good folks who work here. We sell gas and fix cars, nothing glamorous, but we love what we do, and we're going to keep doing it for a long time to come. There's not many real service stations left, and that's a shame. We're the guys just like the guys back in your hometown. We'll fix your tire, change your oil, and put a new set of Michelins on your car. If you want a Twinkie, you'll just have to keep on going. Thanks for the business.
All right.
Aww.
Yeah, it's Ava. It's my dog.
Hi, Ava.
Say hi. So I brought her on because Craft Treats is a great way to calm down your dog if you want them like this, where she is calm and collected and completely good. Go to crafttreats.com, use the code OFFTHEHOOK, and you get a discount on your dog treats, and you can have a dog as chill as mine. So there we go.
Well played.
Caleb, how is your dog?
Oh, he is sleeping now. He was crated. He was a little annoyed for a minute, but he's down now. We took him to the park this morning, and he got to run with a bunch of dogs. He's not affected by the cold at all. It was his 1 year. He turned 1 yesterday.
I saw that. Sirius
Yeah.
turned 1 yesterday. That's very cute. Very, very cute. All right. Anything on the latest on the transfer portal that you have?
No, we don't have a ton of news yet. There's still a bunch of speculation going on with the transfer portal. Wanted to throw in college basketball. I wrote about this yesterday. The Vols were moved up 1 spot to number 6 in the AP poll. They're number 7 in the coaches poll behind Kansas. And as I wrote, that's pretty egregious. They beat Kansas. Both teams have a loss. Their loss is Kansas' loss is more recent. It's the name. The only way you could put Kansas ahead of Tennessee right now in the poll is because of the brand name of Kansas, because they should be ahead. Tennessee should be ahead of them in both polls right now, and that's just ridiculous.
I see that. That is pretty egregious, and it goes back to there's a few schools like that in different sports where your name's obviously going to get you a couple more spots just because of what people have seen you do, in past seasons or whatever. But this season is not last season, so it's definitely a bad thing for other people who are trying to make a name for themselves. So it's not fair. But what do we do about it though, Caleb?
Luckily, I don't know. Luckily, with college football, you got the playoff going to 12 teams, so there will be no controversy anymore. I would think if you have to make a case to be one of the top 6 at-large teams, you didn't do enough to get in. That's going to be my thought for next year. College basketball, it's the same with the NCAA tournament. Yes, teams get cheated out of not making the tournament unfairly, but I'm like, if you have to make the case to be one of the top 33 at-large teams in the nation, you probably won't win in the national championship anyway. So
that's very true. I don't think Cinderella teams ever come close to winning it. I think Sweet 16 or maybe Elite 8.
Yeah, you get a couple. That's the thing about March Madness is I'll talk about this more in March, but because I am the angry old grump with March Madness. It's the most overrated event in the history of the world.
No.
It is. First of all, college basketball, they changed it recently because they moved the three-point line back and they shortened the shot clock. But college basketball was a sport for years that rewarded mediocrity. That was literally designed to help lesser teams win. And and they changed it a little bit to make it a little better. But it's still,
Fighting words.
I'm sorry, it does. I'm like, and then March Madness happens, and everyone's like, I can't wait to see the Kent State go to make a run in the tournament. And by the end of the tournament, it's usually the Blue Bloods that are playing for the national championship, and nothing really changed. You got a couple people get red hot during the portion of it. And I usually like rooting for the better teams in March Madness. I don't even like the upsets. I want to see Duke and Kentucky when they're at their best playing. My thing about competition is I want to see the best compete against each other. I don't want to see Kent State go spoil that party. And I'm sorry, I'm a hater.
You are definitely a hater, that's for sure. Have you ever been to Vegas for March Madness?
I have not. That sounds like a blast.
Okay, it is a blast. You'll I understand the sitting in a sports book and watching the first day of March Madness is insane. It is the best time. So if you have the opportunity, take it and go, because it is so much fun.
I got in-laws in Phoenix. Maybe I'll finagle going to Phoenix and go to Vegas beforehand.
Yeah, but you have to sit in the sports book. That's the thing. You have to sit there.
Okay, definitely will do it.
There's TVs everywhere, and all the games are on, and it's incredible just at the same time. It's just it's wonderful. It's great. So that's my little tidbit of info there. Again, thanks everybody for watching the show. We will be back tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Again, just heartbreaking news today about Coach Mike Leach, and prayers for his family, and prayers for his friends and his team. And it's going to be definitely a different world in college football without him. It's just going to be, it's going to be bad. So for Caleb Calhoun, I am Amanda LaFratta, and we will see you tomorrow at 8:30 a.m.